So I want to bring in an expert in body language to discuss Bryan Koberger's body language, his facial expressions, which are kind of hard to read. He's a stoic guy. He doesn't give us a lot to work with, but we have somebody who knows how to read people pretty well. She is Susan Constantine, and we've had her here on Law and Crime many times before. So thanks for coming on Crime Fix, Susan. I appreciate it. I want to get your thoughts just right off the bat, just generally speaking, a broad overview of what you saw during that hearing the other day when Bryan Koberger is just sitting there. This is a different Bryan Koberger than we've seen, only in that he's now in a jail jumpsuit. They were trying to project this, the presumption of innocence to the public. Now he's in handcuffs. He's restrained. He's guilty. He has admitted that he is guilty. And he's sitting there just taking all of this in and listening as people basically say he's the worst piece of filth on the planet.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch all of that. It was cringeworthy, wasn't it? So, when I'm looking at his overall appearance, he's resolved himself to the issue that he was ready for the big punches. So his overall affect we've seen through in this hearing and throughout, he doesn't show the right amount of natural emotion. I think it's unrealistic to think that we would have. He never has. So to expect something different from what we already know, I think that would be highly unlikely. So the fact that he's detached, he's removed, he's showing a lot of hyper focus in his facial expressions. There are clues, though, if you look close enough, and I think we're going to talk about that in some of these clips.
Well, and we are going to look at the clips. One thing I found interesting, and I was in the courtrooms, and I had a really pretty good view of him. He seemed to be clenching his teeth a lot. And so it's not like I know Bryan Koberger, and, I've been in court with him before, a handful of times, but there was a lot of teeth clenching. There was a lot of this, sticking his tongue into his cheek. As people were speaking. What do you make of that? Is that just like him trying to stop himself from reacting or saying something? What do you think that could be?
All right, well, there's two things, and I'm so glad you said that because this is very interesting about the tongue poke. The tongue poke is when a person is feeling a lot of stress, they'll tongue poke, and what it does is it stretches the fibers of the inside of the mouth. And that's where a lot of anxiety and stress comes from. So if they can stretch those fibers, it helps to release stress. It's a form of manipulation, like with a self-soothing gesture. The other part of it is when you see a tongue poke, that is like taking a sword and striking somebody with it. So you have to tie it to what's being said and where he is doing the tongue poke. Because literally what he's doing, if you think about it, which is kind of freaky, it's like stabbing somebody with a knife every time he's sticking his tongue out, poking it through his cheek. It's a form of anger. We've seen the tongue poke a lot in our research, and that is when you have very strong feelings or opinions, and when they'll do that, it's a form of dislike, distaste, resistance, anger, lots of different adjectives you could sum it up. The other part is when you're clenching your teeth. That is, again, when you've got a lot of cognitive load, high emotional stress, clenching down on it is a way to release some of that tension. It is tension in itself, but by pressing down on it is a form of resisting anger. So anytime you see someone clench down their teeth, this is a form of anger. So pay attention. Those small little, good for you to pick that up because I've been on a lot of shows, and a lot of who've been in the courtroom, no one has ever brought that to my attention. That's significant.
Yeah, I had a really good view of him. And I want to go back now just briefly to his stoic affect. Pre-trial, well, we didn't even get to trial, but when his attorneys were trying to get the death penalty stricken, they were wanting to tell the jury that he had level 1 autism, which used to be called Asperger's syndrome. They said the reason you could put like a horrific crime scene photo up on the Elmo or whatever, and he won't react, is because he's got level 1 autism. It's not because he is a horrible, uncaring human being. It's because he's got this level 1 autism. So you put this horrific stuff up on the screen, he's just going to sit there and be like, whatever. Could that level 1 autism, an Asperger's diagnosis. Now, keep in mind, he was working on his PhD, and I know that doesn't necessarily, those things don't necessarily impact one another. Could that impact somebody's facial expressions to that degree?
Yes, it can. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because I talked about this last night when I was on another show. He has high IQ, low EQ. Okay. Big difference here, right? So he doesn't have the emotional intelligence to be able to regulate emotions. Now you're going to add the autism on top of it. Autism is oftentimes they cannot read or emote emotions correctly because the way they see it, a lot of times they see sadness and anger in autistic children or people with autism. Those are the emotions they see. They also have a hard time emoting in emotion. And that brings me to things that I've been thinking a lot about regarding this case and why he does what he does as far as his facial expressions. No, I think that we need to really consider that there are other underlying issues that are also creating these responses or non-responses, because he has that high level of paranoia. So there's something psychological. Is there something that is neurological? Has there something to do with his learning disorder? All of those things all play in how he's responding, other than the fact that he lacks any sort of empathy and concern, because we see him, he has an antisocial personality disorder. A lot of people are calling this psychopath, sociopath. There's no, and here's the book, just so you know, this is what we use. It's like in
DSM-5. Yes, I'm familiar.
Right? There is no such diagnosis as a psychopath and sociopath. It is antisocial personality disorder. So what we're looking at our traits and expressions and behaviors, and we kind of assign the sociopath to psychopath. So in layman terms, yes, I would call him a sociopath, psychopath.
And to be clear, I just want to clarify, they did say that he had never been tested for that or assessed for that. His attorney said that, but pre-trial, they wanted to bar the state from using the word psychopath or sociopath. But you're right, like, psychopath, they used to call it psychopathy. Now it is called antisocial personality disorder. It would be interesting to see if he will be ever assessed for that, to see whether or not he does indeed have antisocial personality disorder, because I've had a number of people such as yourself say they believe he does. Susan, let's get to the clips now. Dylan Mortensen, she was a surviving roommate. She is the roommate, as you know, who saw the man in all black, the masked man with the bushy eyebrows and the athletic build and toned, slim build, walking through the house that night with what appeared to be a container. So she was probably going to be able to identify him. She couldn't say who he was, but she saw the bushy eyebrows. So she spoke in court, and Bryan Koberger was staring her down. So let's take a look and talk about it on the other side.
Okay.
What happened that night changed everything. Because of him, 4 beautiful, genuine, compassionate people were taken from this world for no reason. He didn't just take their lives. He took the light they carried it into every room. He took away how they made everyone feel safe, loved, and full of joy. He took away the ability for me to tell him that I love him and that I'm so proud of them.
Okay,
Okay,
Susan,
so
what did you see?
okay, I'm going to show you what I do. Okay, so your viewers are kind of getting into my head what I do. I'm looking at the 52 different muscles in his face, and just in our mouth, we have 20 muscles that activate. You will see what I call a very quick, extremely micro, when I mean ever so slight, there is a concealed smirk. There was one smirk that popped out there and immediately released, okay? That was what we call leakage. If it were to maintain, it could be performance, but it wasn't. When it's leaked, it's telling you psychologically and emotionally what that person is feeling, and then it's masked very quickly. So there was a form of what I would call enjoyment. I see this in the BTK. I'm on that task force. Same kind of weird smirk that pops in and then goes back into neutral. The other thing that I saw was there's these little micro head nods, and pay attention because you'll just see them. Just see how my head is just slightly moving.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It was happening the whole day. Like
Yeah.
it was just very subtle, like a slight head nod. It was even less subtle than what I'm doing.
Yeah, so these are all what we call leakages. And when a person is, we see this at admission of guilt, we'll say, you'll ask them a question regarding an incident, and then there is a form of affirmation or agreement, or can be in they're hearing you, they're giving you affirmation that they're acknowledging. And it's ever so micro. It's not these big ones like I'm doing with you. When you're talking, I go, oh, yes, I get that. And we do these head nods. They're very, very micro leakages. So he's acknowledging what she's saying, and he is hearing what she's saying. And then now you combine, there's a couple deep breaths that happen, right? Did you see that? And it was here up high in the chest versus down low. So how do I know that? Is because I can see his shirt moving right here. When you see these deep breaths, it's not like where you can see it more demonstratively. He masks a lot of his emotion. He contains a lot of his emotions. So you're only going to see fragments of it. But when we see that, that's fear. You know, when we are breathing high in the chest and it starts to beat a little bit faster, higher in the chest, that's a fear response.
Mm-hmm. Now let's go to our next clip. This is where a relative of Xana Kernodle, I believe it was her stepfather, basically told Bryan Koberger he wants to take him out in the woods for 5 minutes and teach him a lesson. So play the clip.
I don't know what my limits are here, but I'm really struggling, dude. I am struggling. So I want to just be out in the woods with you just so I can teach you about loss and pain. I love God. I wouldn't take your life. That's up to him. But I guarantee you, you are weak. God, I would just give a moment, man, 5 minutes out in the woods. Oh, man. Ooh. You're going to go to hell. I know people believe in other stuff. You're evil. There's no place for you in heaven. You took our children. You are going to suffer, man. I'm shaking because I want to reach out to you, but I hope you feel my energy, okay? Go to hell.
All right, Susan.
Well, I just love these clips. They're so good. There's so much information here. So you can see from the very beginning when there's another affirmation, right? You see the head nod again. Mm-hmm. Then you look and you see, when does it stop? So there was acknowledgement very early on, and then it stopped. Then he mentions about he's weak, right? You just see an eye blink. It's not very long. I was looking to see if there was a longer eye closure or maybe a rapid one. None. Zippo, zip, zip, nada, nada. So what does that mean? That tells me that there's no cognitive load. So it didn't affect him. That did not land. in the way that I think that he was hoping that it would, that it would somehow create some sort of physiological response. Nothing happened. And then even when he said that he was evil, right? His eyes became very still and his head became very still. So again, what does that actually mean? Just means that it's different from when we saw the difference. So we're looking at the baseline. Why did it slightly change when he said he was evil? It would be interesting if he really believed that. You would have seen a little head nod. I don't think he sees himself as being evil.
Interesting. All right, let's look at our next one. This is Olivia Gonsalves, the sister of Kaylee Gonsalves, wrapping up her victim impact statement and really letting him have it.
The truth is, you're as dumb as they come. Stupid, clumsy, slow, sloppy, weak, dirty. Let me be very clear. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. I see through you. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your ass. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we see the swallow. Did you see the swallow? When she first started off, and I don't know exactly what was the word or phrase that she said, it was heart impact, but what was coupled with that was a rapid flutter. So that is what we call a cluster. So that's something to really pay attention to. That's cognitive load. So anytime a person swallows, right, that's you're taking a big hit. Something is kind of thrown you off, and it's like you're about to hear something really bad. And naturally, what we do, you might even say, "I'm going to swallow before you hear the bad impact." So he was almost prepared for it. And then the cognitive load, meaning like that was where it was almost a bit overwhelming. So that created this cognitive load. It's called like a cognitive dissonance. And that's what happens when you hear something and all of a sudden you have a response, like it was almost like you almost didn't expect that. So it took a minute for that to actually process, and that's why we call that cognitive load. So then she had mentioned she uses a lot of adjectives, right? And she's of course using like the one with dirty, and there were several other things that she was saying. Watch his eye blink every time that she would use a specific adjective. You would see him blink, 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 blink. Again, that's cognitive load. Those are all like punches. You don't see him like how a person that shows real empathy, where they would become angry or they would be taken back or they grimace. He doesn't do that. He expresses differently, okay? And that's why I'm saying there's more going on than what we see that's happening psychologically, biologically, maybe even spiritually, because personally, I think the guy's demon possessed, but that's for another conversation.
I want to know what you think about him looking over at the gallery. I have my own take on it.
Yes.
After the clapping, what did you make of that?
That's just a confirmation. So what he's looking at is a confirmation glance. He's looking to see who was clapping, who responded to it. Sometimes people would do this even with their attorney. If they're making a statement, they'll look over to see, did I do that right? Is that okay? It's a confirmation glance. So for him in this scenario he was wanting to see how other people responded to that impact statement, those words. Were those people showing any emotion? And it's very quick. He reminds me, it's kind of kooky when you think about like a Chucky doll, and then we see these horror movies and their face is still and then just their eyes move. He does a lot of that. So he's really under control. He's got a lot of control. But that was a confirmation glance.
Let's look now just briefly at the one and only time during this hearing we saw Bryan Koberger speak.
All right, Mr. Koberger, you have an opportunity to make a statement if you wish to. I take it you are declining.
I respectfully decline.
Well,
All right. What did you think?
Okay. So I wrote this down and I want to read it to you. It says, I respectfully decline. He wasn't just refusing to answer, he was sidestepping a minefield. In the world of statement analysis, this kind of paraphrasing raises a red flag. It's the polite way on the surface, but underneath it is a strategic dodge. He didn't deny, didn't acknowledge, didn't even hint at emotion. Instead, he distanced himself with a careful wording refusal that sounded respectful, but reveals insensitivity in high stake cases like this one. So I was putting my thoughts together about that, because when a person says, I respectfully, decline, he should have said, no, Your Honor, or I decline, but I respectfully decline. So and the surface of that, it would seem as if he was being respectful or cordial. The fact that he actually had to say, I respectfully, is he is trying to take the power back. Like, it's more about me than it is you. So that is a way of dodging out of answering, I decline, being a firm denial.
All right, let's look at our last clip now. This is Bryan Koberger listening to Judge Hippler. And what's interesting about this is that everybody keeps saying, law enforcement, the judge, the victims, that Bryan Koberger wants fame and they don't want to give it to him. And so there must be something that they know that Bryan Koberger, this introvert, wants fame. So let's watch what Judge Hippler said to him.
the time has now come to end Mr. Koberger's 15 minutes of fame. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration.
Okay, so here's another one where if you look at his facial expressions, you will see a very micro-gradual disdain. So his eyes become more fixated, his orbital muscles around his eyes become more tense, and you'll start to see his lips start to press in. When I looked at that whole part, because there's a whole part of it, what I was interpreting that is that he was reminiscing, as he was saying that, about assaulting the judge. I saw the killer instinct when the judge was saying that, of his hatred. It's almost a form of a nonverbal slaying of that judge. And if you could see that morph, and what, just so you know that when I'm analyzing these really intense moments, I slow a video down so low that I can literally see them in microseconds. And when you see them in microseconds, you can start to see where the lips start to just kind of slightly tighten, right? Eyes become more fixated, brows come down more. So that is like what we call a preeminent attack, physical attack on a person. That's what we call dangerous demeanor. So that was actually a precursor to imminent violence.
Interesting. So you felt he was like, to the judge, almost like how dare you? Like if he could, he would have hurt the judge.
I think that he was actually reminiscing, thinking about the attacking on. There was something that was happening in that moment of where he was so fixated. I think that he was thinking about, I hate to say this, but it's almost like killing him or attacking that judge. You could see that anger, that killer eye, the killer instinct of what those individuals saw during that attack. Because what we call this is what we call precursors. We call it left to bang, right? And left to bang means, what are the indicators that we can pick up that are precursors to imminent violence? So you only have a microseconds to get out. A microsecond, because it happens that fast. So that's what I saw was an eye alert, which are preeminent behavior indicators of what you see before an attack. But he keeps himself very contrite and controlled. That's why you only see the eye blinks, right? He's like a teapot. He's holding all that energy in, and the only place you can see it is in a little eyebrow blink, or maybe just a little tightening of the lips, furrowing of the brows ever so slightly, or micro head nods.
Wow. Well, Susan Constantine, I really appreciate your time and your expertise as always. Thank you so much for coming on. Hope you'll come back.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.